This week on the Virtual Skeptics. Bob objects. Argumentative, Your Honor. Eve lives under a rock. And Tim fakes the news. I'm your host, Brian Gregory, and my technology is totally busted. And including the volume, because I can't seem to get that intro volume right.
Just right, not in the butter.
I know, it's like a little bit up, a little bit down. Yeah. Okay. Hi, everybody, this is the Virtual Skeptics. Thank you for tuning in to our shindig here. Let me introduce the crew. Whoa, why did it pop? Did you hear that?
I heard. I thought that was you clucking, and I didn't know why you were doing that.
That was weird. Okay, first up we got Bob Blaskowitz, CSI's conspiracy guy, web columnist, blogger for Skeptical Humanities, and Skepticality contributor. Next up we have Eve Siebert, editor and blogger at Skeptical Humanities and contributor to Skepticality and Insight at skeptic.com. And also we have Tim Farley, blogger at SkepTools and Insight at skeptic.com, Skepticality contributor and creator of What's the Harm, and former JREF fellow. Oh my God, you guys have done a ton of things.
It's true.
Yes. We've done a few things. Nothing lately.
Yeah, it's the summer.
For me.
We're late, sitting around, whatever. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hey, there you go. That's the energy I'm looking for. Things we do at the beginning of the show, besides introducing these exciting folks, is we ask a trivia question to the people, the 5 of you that are watching us right now, and anyone else who tunes in while we're actually reading it. Tim, do we have a trivia question?
Yes. It is about an asteroid that was discovered today, on this day, in August 31st, 1983. Asteroid number 3450 was discovered.
It's pretty clear why they renamed it.
Well, yeah. They get numbered, well, it's a long story. They get one number when they're found, and then they get an official number, which is up in the hundreds of thousands now, I think. And then they get a name, if the person who discovered it chooses to pick one. And an amazing number of them, for some reason, get named after astronomers.
No kidding.
Huh.
Yeah.
I wonder why that is.
Well, anyway, this one was named Dommonget. I think that's how you pronounce it, for the astronomer Jean Dommonget.
I was going to say Dom Magnet.
Dom Magnet, yeah.
You international man of suaveness.
Right. Well, this isn't the virtual astronomers. It's the virtual skeptics. So what is Jean Dommonget's skeptic connection? What skeptic organization was he once the president of?
Wow.
And I've mentioned this skeptic organization in a trivia question prior on the show. So if you remember all 179 prior episodes,
and I'm waiting to see how you fit that into the number of characters for Twitter. Because that was a long description.
Didn't think that one through, did you?
Yeah. So there you go. The question will be tweeted out as soon as Tim can edit it down. And the secondary thing is there's a thing behind me, and it's already been done and things and stuff. If you can figure out what it is, tweet it. Because, please, this one is just so easy. Just, affirm me with a tweet, if you know what it is. Thank you.
Oh, that was just sad, yeah.
I know. Anyway, moving right along. If you're involved, if you're watching, you can be involved. If you tweet with hashtag Virtual Skeptics, some people have been doing that already because they're veterans of the program. If you're on YouTube, watching on YouTube, you can comment, and we'll track the comments there. And I think the Q&A app is dead, so sorry.
Forget that.
Yeah. So YouTube or Twitter, and we will try to get you involved in what we're doing here. And first up, Tim is first this week. And he's got an interesting story. Why don't you just jump right in?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about Facebook and the news.
Yeah.
If you follow a lot of the people I follow that aren't skeptics are people in the journalism industry because they're very interested in fact checking and how false stories pass around, and there's sort of the whole problem of science communication in the news and da 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 da. So it's kind of an interesting area to kind of keep track of. And there's a lot of interesting innovation being done. And one of the big concerns of journalism, obviously journalism as a whole has been in flux for years, ever since the internet started and disrupted the basic business model of newspapers, which was advertising, local-based advertising, want ads and classified ads, and then the big display ads in your newspaper paid for fantastic Pulitzer Prize-winning journalism for like 50 years in this country, because your local newspaper was the major way to contact people in your town and tell them about jobs and tell them about used cars and all that stuff. And the internet came along and destroyed all that with Craigslist and eBay and all these other ways you can sell and advertise things. And so newspapers have been going bankrupt left, right, and sideways and being merged together. And most cities like Atlanta that used to have 2 or 3 newspapers now are lucky if they have one that has a hyphenated name. And most of the newspapers are trying to figure out how to be online. And in the last few years, that has meant being on social media. And Facebook in particular has courted journalism organizations and tried to be the way that people reach their, find their news. And some studies have shown that like 63% of regular Facebook users get all their news from Facebook. They just see what news stories come down their feed, and that's what they read. Well, the problem is that unlike some simpler social media systems like Twitter, Twitter's starting to change too, but historically, Twitter was you followed a bunch of people, whatever they tweeted, that's what came up in your feed, and it was sequential. And so you completely curated what was in your feed. Facebook has, as far as I know, never been that way. Maybe if you only have 6 friends, it works that way. But if you have more than a few friends, Facebook decides which of their posts show up on your page. So some of your friends' posts may never show up on your page unless you go and seek them out. And it does this based on very complicated algorithms, which of course for competitive reasons, Facebook never discloses to anyone. Right? So it has to do with things that you like and who interacts with your posts and whose other posts you interact with, and that's one of the reasons everybody wants you to like their page, because those likes are part of the currency of how things get displayed. And every once in a while Facebook makes a change in how that whole mechanism works, and everybody goes absolutely berserk, because literally there are some sites that depend so much on Facebook sending traffic to them that a tiny change in the Facebook algorithm can destroy their readership for a week.
Yeah.
And it used to be that Google was what everybody worried about in that respect, because somewhere between 30 to 50% of your traffic on any website comes from search engines, and that has been going down over the years as social media has taken over.
Really?
And it's still, it depends on the type of site. Like a big percentage of my What's the Harm traffic still comes from search.
Yeah.
But certainly news sites, much more of it comes from social media. So you're dependent on those trending topic algorithms, and in particular, what people decide to talk about if they're locked in to the Facebook thing depends on what Facebook is going to expose, and it becomes this self-fulfilling feedback loop. And people have worried about the filter bubble. If all your friends are, in the same political stripe as you, you're only going to see articles that everybody agrees with, Recently, some people have been paying attention to In particular, the trending topics, the little box in the usually in the upper right on Facebook, that shows you what the top news is, which some people will go up there and read those stories and then post them to their own feed, and that sort of causes things to propagate. And the question becomes, how does Facebook decide what goes up there? And again, they say, well, it's a completely democratic algorithm. Nobody's involved. The machines decide based on what people are seeing. But people who have dug into it have found these weird quirks in what shows up there. Like the oddest things will show up there. And a few months, weeks or months back, is the website Gizmodo, which was one of the Gawker sites that just got sold off. It was their tech site. Did an investigation where they found some people who worked for Facebook, and part of their job was to partially curate what was in those trending topics. Doing things like, it's one thing to determine that, hey, here's this link that 1 million people have just sent, but you can't just show a link up in the corner. You have to show some sort of short description, and maybe the headline isn't the best thing to display up there. So they had, for a while, they had some editors, basically, who would look at what the algorithm was popping up using some sort of console that only they saw, and would lightly edit what showed up there. So like if a porn site popped up, then they would drop that out. They don't want to be showing porn to kids or whatever. And if it was a site that was obviously, fake news, just some kind of, baloney story, they were told to remove that. But otherwise, they weren't supposed to alter the algorithm. But what came out of these interviews with these former employees was that they claimed that they were told to downplay certain conservative websites like Breitbart and Fox News.
I have no problems with something like Breitbart.
Yeah.
It doesn't rise to the level of news.
Right. So anyway, there was a big uproar in the conservative parts of the web where, Facebook is censoring us and they're not letting our stories go up there. So Facebook, first of all, denied that was happening. And then they couldn't really deny completely that it was happening because there were these people there who were saying, yeah, I used to work there. Here's my pay stub from 6 weeks ago. So then what Facebook said was, well, we're going to take them out of the loop. What we're going to do is we're going to make a change, and we're going to take the people out of the loop, the editor types that we were hiring, and it's only going to be engineers, and they're strictly going to be doing very mechanical sorts of things like making sure porn doesn't show up and stuff like that, but no editorial decisions and no changing of what the text shows up there. And they literally announced this, I think, last Friday. And over the weekend, like within there were at least 2 wildly incorrect fake news stories that were trending on Facebook. One of them was something about one of them wasn't really a fake news story, but it was a dumb thing. It was about a guy basically trying to have sex with a McChicken sandwich. Apparently, I haven't clicked on the link because I don't even want to know.
Who wants to?
Yeah, who would want to see that? But the interesting thing is that people noticed this, and it's like, why is this in the trending topics? And there's some stuff there where it'll show you how many people are posting about it. And Facebook's own statistics next to the story said that very few people were actually passing it along. So it was like, well, why is it there? But the big one that caught everyone's attention was a completely false, like the headline had like 3 false things in it, just in the headline. A story about Megyn Kelly, the Fox News anchor who got in a big public spat with Donald Trump, 8 months ago?
Yeah.
During the primary debates. And it was something about she actually supports President Clinton and she's going to get fired by Fox and da-da-da-da-da. Complete bullshit. It was from one of these fake news sites that just makes up fake stories and just to get the clicks. And it got into the trending topics, and it stayed there for several hours. And it was an example of how the Facebook algorithm, when they don't have those editors tweaking what shows up in there, quite frankly, sucks. It's just not that good.
Yeah.
It picks stories based on odd quirks in how things are moving, and clearly some of these fake news sites, just like they've figured out how to game Twitter and they figured out how to game Facebook likes, they figured out how to game the trending topics and get complete bogus crap up in the news. And you say, well, you know, you'd have to be an idiot to not know that Megyn Kelly story was false. And that's correct, okay? You know, if you knew who Megyn Kelly was, you'd know that story was false right off the top of reading it. But here's the point. What if it wasn't that obvious? What if it was a story, you know, that it was not really clear whether or not it was true? What if it was a story about one of the many things we talk about in skeptic land? About, you know, some pseudoscientific thing or some conspiracy theory thing. And the Facebook algorithm decided, hey, a bunch of people are talking about this, it must be a good thing, and no one was there to fact check it or to remove it from the trending topics. Quartz has a really good story where they've dug into what they've been able to publicly discover about the algorithm. The problem, of course, is that all these companies like Facebook keep the details of their algorithm secret for competitive reasons, and that means there's no transparency in how stuff shows up there and how stuff doesn't show up there. They do that deliberately because they don't want people to learn how it works, so they'll game the system. But the problem is that people who want to know whether or not to trust what's in trending topics don't have any information to base their decision of their trust on it. You know, why should I trust this algorithm? And I've heard skeptics, and when I've talked about, you know, Google bombing and SEO and talking about trying to kind of work the Google algorithm to try to get skeptic stuff to show up, I've had skeptics say, well, why don't we compete more fairly and let the free market of information percolate our stuff to the top. And the fact of the matter is, it's not a free market. You know, Google controls the way the market works. They control the money. And
well, I mean, you could argue that gaming the system because everyone else is gaming the system makes it free and even.
I guess, but you know, it depends.
That's the competition.
Right, but you know, then instead of competing on the truth or falsity of your own information, you're competing on, you know, your current excess or lack of information about the latest revision of Facebook or Google's algorithm, which could change at any time. So, you know, it really gets into some interesting questions. If so many people are depending on Facebook for their news, how are we going to fight the battle against misinformation? I mean, do we even have a chance at this point?
Well,
I mean, obviously not everybody gets their news from Facebook. You know, it's easy to get caught up in the, oh, we're doomed.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, it's younger people.
It's an example of, I mean,
and, you know, and there's the TV news and legitimate newspapers still exist and still sell millions of copies. So obviously there's still other ways to get news, but it's worrisome that a company that won't even tell us how the algorithm works, and clearly the algorithm has huge flaws in it, controls how much, and controls in a very big way what people see on their news page when they go to it in the morning. And what's that going to mean for something like, you know, how people decide to vote in an election?
It seems to me that there could be a couple of different potential fixes that would satisfy probably nobody.
Nobody in power, that's for sure.
Well, you know, like, so you give people the option of what you want the front page feeds to be. You want your New York Times, and you want the Wall Street Journal, and you want Gizmodo or whatever. You know, like something like that. Another thing you could do is have the people back in place making editorial decisions as editors, and have an ombudsman or something. Have somebody who's responsible for answering questions
Right.
about how this ended up, and tell people to pound sand if they don't like the explanation.
That would be the legitimate journalistic way to do it. To
Yeah.
have fact checkers, have editors. Here's the problem: companies like Facebook and Google loathe getting people involved in the process, because as soon as you get people involved in the process, you can't scale. Because if you think about it,
Oh, yeah.
here's the issue. You could have a squad of 20 or 30 editors and a couple of ombudsmen for the U.S., but your Facebook, you have 1 billion users all over the world. You now have to have French-speaking editors, German-speaking editors, Spanish-speaking editors, Turkish-speaking editors. Just go down the list. You've got to have a different set of editors for every country. And it's not even enough to have different languages, but because you've got to be aware of what's true and false in the news in that country. You've got to have some knowledge of the stories to even know whether to fact check something.
And
So
then there's local
basically have to have-
regulation and politics get involved.
Right, and that's one of the reasons that they try, at least the theory is, I think, that they try to avoid regulation, is they say, hey, look, we're not a journalism thing. We are not editing something. We're not making an editorial decision. It's computers simply giving these people what these other people that they know are talking about. And the fact of the matter is, they claim that there's some sort of democratic process there that's being moderated by the computer, but when people dig into it, it's really screwed up.
Yeah.
It's really screwed up.
Yeah.
It's kind of depressing. Lately I've been thinking about some of the stuff that's
Turned over
going.
their browsing to Facebook, their news browsing to Facebook.
Yeah, I don't.
Do
That's
better,
not how I
people.
get my news. I use Facebook to find out what my friends are up to, but I still use an old RSS feed reader
Yeah.
to read the sites that I have chosen to read, and get headlines that way.
Yeah.
But
And I read the local paper, 'cause I'm like an old school.
what?
I even get the paper subscription for the weekends. 'Cause I like reading the paper on my frickin' porch.
Let's see your.
You like that porch a lot.
I do. I love my porch. Don't diss the porch, man. But no, but the local news is, I mean, crime information, which is kind of interesting, and some of the local government stuff. But most everything else, it's all. I mean, it's about 70% fluff,
Yeah.
which is, I don't know.
It's scary on some level when you think about, because the press, they say, what's the term, the fourth estate.
Mm-hmm.
They're supposed to play an important role in our democracy, to act as the sort of check in when politicians and whoever else are full of shit. The journalists are supposed to go in and find that out. And
The algorithm will figure that out, Tim. Come on.
The journalists are all going out of business. Who's going to investigate this shit?
This is the best argument I've heard so far for a neutral artificial intelligence that runs, or at least checks. I mean, where's Isaac when we need him? Where are the brains?
I can call IBM. We can have Watson solve that problem.
Watson's not smart enough yet. We need 3 law-safe brains.
There you go.
They're more moral than we are. A couple of quick. I've been one of our favorite sometime watchers, Dr. Landis, is watching tonight, and of course he's very active on the Twitters and has been commenting on what we're talking about, including, let's see here, we never had this kind of informational monopolization on Usenet, which I thought was humorous.
That's a get off my lawn comment.
Yep. He also suggests that Siri and Cortana get together and solve this problem, and that's hot.
No, it's Siri. Oh, yes. Yeah, wow. That's sad.
And then finally, he suggested that if I don't read my paper on my porch, then how am I going to keep those kids off my lawn?
Yeah,
so
that's
there
a good
you go.
point. Good point.
And I agree. That's how I keep those kids off my lawn. That was very interesting, Tim. I saw it earlier and I thought of you, and I'm glad that you had a chance to talk about it in more detail. But moving right along, we got more people to talk about stuff. Bob is I'm not sure what he's some kind of court case thing.
Yep.
And oh my God, this is this is
All right.
Quack Watch.
Yep. So,
Yeah.
good news, everyone.
Good news, everyone.
According to
Usually said that.
an Associated Press report that was reprinted widely over the last week, a lawsuit against, you could bring up the first slide, Stephen J. Barrett. I'm not. Those are all Stephen J. Barretts. I've never seen the actual Stephen J. Barrett.
I don't think
So
those
the
are
one
right.
in the
So
middle.
this is a sampling of possible Stephen J. Barretts.
It's the one in the middle.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, okay.
But they are Stephen J. Whatever. So
Dr. Stephen J. Barrett.
two of them will be very surprised to hear that they're being sued. All right. So founder of the Venerable Quackwatch website is a lawsuit against him has been thrown out because the anti-aging quacks who are suing him forgot to mention in their lawsuit how they were libeled.
Whoops.
Whoops. Like, I don't want to tell lawyers how to do their jobs, but next time, guys, you might mention a good reason that you're suing. Anecdotally, I hear it helps.
So they were quack doctors and they hired quack lawyers to...
So I can't help but wonder, I have written here, whether or not the quacks in this case, Robert Goldman and Ronald Klatz, hired the legal equivalents of anti-aging quacks.
Sorry,
So-
I stepped on your joke there.
That's okay. It was as inevitable as sunset. So according to the article, the judge said that the suit, quote, which this is quoting the article, which sought $10 million in removal of the article, did not describe facts sufficient to demonstrate it was false to imply that they falsely pretended to have medical skills or knowledge. This one is, I don't know how you can lose it by calling an anti-aging person a quack. Quack is quintessential opinion in the first place, and anti-aging isn't really a thing. It's like it's the philosopher's stone. It's the oldest form of quackery to make people live forever. So I don't know where this is going. One of the important things, it's important that skeptics fight this stuff out, I think. Otherwise, you get bulldozed by bullies.
And it's not the first time a battle over the word quack has been fought.
That's true. Well, it may not just be quack. He may have implied things about them that they didn't have proper certification or something. There may be something
Your
else
mother
going on.
is a hamster.
Right, but there have been a couple of lawsuits in Europe. I think that Belgium and definitely in Holland and in the Netherlands, they fought long lawsuits specifically over the word quack.
Right, yeah.
Whether or not it was one-
Quack.
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 That's right.
It's true. And so, yeah, that's a that was good news. I'm pleased to see that. He's still fighting. Do you remember about 6 years ago, Quackwatch was getting sued by Doctors Data?
Yeah.
Do you remember that? It was a group out of like Chicago or something, maybe?
Yep.
That was doing heavy metal testing or something.
Yeah, I think was it hair testing
or something like
if you were
that.
toxically thing and the hair test.
Made you autistic or whatever.
Yeah.
That's still being fought in court.
Yep.
I went to the Pacer website to look up this one. I couldn't find it, but the other one's still going on.
Yeah, every once in a while, Mr. Crazy Quack friend Tim Bolin
What a dweeb.
issues one of his screeds, and he just loves that Doctor's Data case. He just loves to just rant on and on
Yeah.
about whatever the latest like dumb procedural filing is in it.
All I can see is, seriously, attorneys pulling out.
Yeah.
Like, half of it is attorneys pulling out. It's the weirdest thing. And can I mention one other thing? And a different. That was my topic, but one other thing. We had 3 stories come out this week in high-profile locations about Brzezinski.
Mm-hmm.
Yay! We had The Guardian. There was a column written about fundraising online for experimental treatments. And then Stat News, they made good. Sheila Kaplan, a reporter, an earlier story that they did 3 or 4 months ago about Neil Fashon, a kid who wanted to be on the trials. They didn't really display the complexity behind why the FDA was doing what they were doing. And they kept on the case, and Sheila published a story about the political influence and how it may cause problems with these trials. So she made a FOIA request, got a huge number of examples. Actually, in the FOIA request were a number of lobbying packets that I sent out way back in the day to all sorts of people. So that was kind of cool to see. But yeah. So, and then the other, it was picked up in the Stat News report was picked up by the Washington Post today.
Nice.
Nice.
Yep. So,
Awesome. So things are picking up.
Yeah, give us about another month or so, and we'll know about Brzezinski.
Is that when the medical board's supposed to?
That's when the judges will return. I guess about 6 weeks they'll return their findings based on the hearings. I think that they got him on billing in no uncertain terms. The other stuff is you never know,
Right.
but the billing is just numbers basically. I mean it was that clear. So we'll see.
All right.
All right. Wow. Cool. Thanks for the heads up on all that stuff. I'm supposed to go next.
Yep.
Okay, fine.
Robot.
Yeah. There's the thing and the thing. This is the my segment.
Try not to sound too excited about
Well,
your
it's been some slow weeks. Let me throw this up
Robots have taken the summer off.
segment.
Yeah, that's true.
It's too hot for a robot.
Why is it so loud? I can't turn the volume down, so you're just going to have to listen to... Okay. So, there's a big company called SRA International that does all kinds of technology-related startup. Well, they do research and development on all kinds of stuff, and great, big, huge consulting firm. Now, they're spinning off a firm that's supposed to do technological applications in agriculture, and their first big thing that they're coming up with is this automated apple picker, and it uses cameras to locate the apples, and then it zooms in on them and sucks them in. And unfortunately, the video doesn't have that noise because I really wanted to hear what it sounds like when this thing sucks up the shunk, shunk, shunk. It seems, I mean, most of the technology involved in this is my favorite view, by the way. This is the first-person view. I love this.
The first person
on the apple sucker. Apple sucker. So, none of this technology is new. I mean, I guess maybe some of the actual technology
Sucking technology?
Well, the sucking technology, yeah, I think that might be a new application, but the vision and the kinematics involved in relating target picking with movement, all that stuff has been done before. It's just kind of a neat new application. There's a picture of at least the targets. So, I mean, that's existing technology, being able to look at a camera view and based on features coming up with a pattern that they can zoom in on. And I guess in the case of apple trees, because of the color difference, it's pretty easy to find a pattern that you can target. I mean, maybe there are cases. I don't know that much about apple trees, but there probably may be cases that are hard to find. And I still think that maybe it's not 100% effective. And you still have to have a person drive the thing out there, and I'm not sure how this technology will actually take off.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, in the general sense, you could have a machine that's maintained by one technically savvy person, as opposed to a staff of, 200 migrant workers, or 200 low-paid workers. So,
but those people are disposable.
Oh, Bob.
No, I mean, I don't mean that seriously. It's just that
I don't know the economics of this particular agricultural industry, but apparently there's a market enough for this thing that they think they can sell it. But I mean, putting all that stuff aside, it's still kind of a cool technology, and I hope to hear the sound soon because I want to hear the shunk shunk sound. And I mean, in terms of robot apocalypse, I mean, taking out the supply chain is a good military tactic, So
this is the robotic version of scorched earth.
I guess so. They take our food away and we just starve, and they can't make us into batteries.
Wouldn't a robotic version of the scorched earth be a robot that scorches the earth?
That's true.
Once again, Eve is keeping us honest.
That's true. But this picks apples.
Yeah.
And I hope that it makes
Does it use them as ammunition? Can you reverse it from suck to blow?
My God, I hope so. That would be so awesome.
Pew 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 pew.
She's gone from suck to blow. Never mind. Anyway, I'll link to the IEEE article on this and the website of the company that is starting up to build these things. If anyone wants to know the technical details of sucking apples. And that's that. Up next is Eve, and hopefully she has something more interesting than sucking apples.
I got elves.
Yay!
Yay. Well, the elves have had another victory in Iceland. The elfin Lady Stone has been restored to its former glory. And I should begin by crediting or blaming Bob, who foisted this story onto me. And also,
I didn't make you pick it.
I know. It kind of relates to how news is presented in these modern times of ours, because
in which we live in?
Yes,
by elves.
Yes, it turns out really there's less to the story than meets the eye. But anyway, while Iceland is occasionally touted by skeptics as a sort of atheist mecca, these skeptics may ignore or forget the fact that religion isn't the only irrational belief in the world. And Icelanders are known or sort of infamous for their belief in other supernatural beings, particularly elves, or the Huldafolk, the hidden people. Excuse me. An Icelandic politician, and I did a story on this back in the day. He believed his survival of a bad car accident was caused by elves. They rescued him.
Eve, are you suddenly becoming very elderly very, very quickly?
I'm getting a cold, and so
Oh.
I blame
anyway,
elves.
I do too. So he thought he had been saved by elves, so he decided to have their elf rock moved onto his property after employing an elf communicator to negotiate with the multi-generational inhabitants of the multi-storied elf rock. So there's that. Building projects over the years have been halted, delayed, or revised because of concerns about elf rocks. A few years ago, there were large protests. I was going to say massive protests, but in fact, the non-Icelandic press kind of blew them out of proportion as well. But there were large protests over a plan to blast a road through a lava field. And it was claimed the project would disturb both the nesting sites of birds. There are a lot of birds that nest in Iceland, but also an elfin community, including an elf church. It was supposed to be one of their holiest sites. Yeah.
Isengard?
Sure. The legal battle went on for years, and
Who represented the elves?
Elrod?
Ragnhildur. Environmentalists joined forces with elf supporters, the elf lobby, but primarily the elf lobby was the same woman who communicated with the politicians' elves, whose name is Ragnhildur Jansson, I think. Ultimately, the elf church was moved, and the environmental concerns may also have been addressed. I'm not really sure, because you can't find that information anywhere on the internet, at least in English. In the present case, there's a somewhat confusing chronology. All the stories, and there are many, including a couple in Japanese, are based, whether they acknowledge it or not, on a story from Iceland Monitor. Iceland Monitor is an English language news site published by the same company that publishes Morgunblaðið, or the morning paper. Interestingly, Morgunblaðið also posted a story about this elf rock. That story, in Icelandic, is 3 fairly short paragraphs long and does not mention elves. The title is Elfin Ladystone in Siglufjordur, excavated and cleaned. So the only mention of elves is just the name of the rock. The English language story in Iceland Monitor, titled Elf Rock Restored After Its Removal Wreaks Havoc on Iceland Town, is many times the length of the Icelandic story and includes a picture of Kate Blanchett as Galadriel, who's not actually technically an Icelandic elf living under a rock, as far as I know. So, what happened? Well, a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, at the end of August, after heavy rains, a mudslide dumped 10 to 12,000 cubic meters of soil on a road in Siglufjordur, northern Iceland, and as I understand it, that's a large amount of mud. Road workers clearing the road inadvertently dumped the muck on top of Alfkonustein, or Elfin Ladystone, which is believed by some to be inhabited by elves. After the stone was buried, a series of misfortunes afflicted the company that buried it. Except, here's where the chronology is confusing. It's not clear whether all, or indeed any, of the misfortunes happened after the mud was dumped on the stone. Even if they did occur afterwards, it sounds like they were related to the same storm that caused the mudslide in the first place. So that's kind of weird. All the tales of misfortune seem to come from Svein Zofaniason, one of the
Well
owners of the, huh?
No, well done.
Yeah. One of the owners of the company that cleared the road. He notes that when they first showed up, quote, "We couldn't believe our eyes. I'd never seen the road like that before," unquote. And now that's before the rock was covered. That's when they first got there and saw the mess. He says again later that they never seen floods or mudslides like this. Could be elves, could be climate change, could just be Iceland. Iceland is known to many outsiders for its elves, its penis museum, and its weather. If you want to learn about Iceland's weather, watch the extra features on winged migration on the DVD, because they filmed part of that.
Which you obviously have.
Yes. Or watch Wrath of Gods, a documentary made about the filming of the movie Beowulf and Grendel. And the documentary is so much better than the actual film. They had encounters with Iceland's weather. Also, the hall they built burnt down. Anyway, so Icelandic weather can be brutal. There are avalanches, flooding, mudslides.
Dogs and cats living together.
Volcanoes, if you count
Yeah.
that as
Well,
weather.
yeah, ridiculously strong winds, and that is without any intervention from earthquakes and volcanoes. And by the way, looking at Iceland Monitor this morning, the real focus today seems to have been there were 3 different stories about earthquakes under or in the vicinity of 2 different subglacial volcanoes, including Iceland's biggest volcano. You want to see flooding, have a major eruption in a subglacial volcano. But they seem to be saying the magma doesn't seem to be moving, but they're getting earthquakes. Anyway, getting back to the Elf Rock. So the misfortunes. A worker fell down and got an ouchie and couldn't work for a few days.
Oh.
Yeah. The weather was so bad they couldn't dig and had to leave the equipment out. Again, these things happened before they started clearing the road. Most dramatically, quote, "We then saw that more mudslides had fallen on the Faneri road, and I decided to move the bulldozer in case something should fall on it. I had just gotten into the vehicle when I see a mudslide coming toward me, like a gigantic ball. When it hit the river flood, it exploded, and water and rocks went everywhere. We fled." Anyway, it took 10 days to clear the road. Bulldozers broke down. A reporter sank into the mud up to his waist and had to be rescued. Those are the misfortunes. So how stupid are these elves? If we assume they had something to do with these mishaps, they must have caused the storm, which resulted in the mudslide that resulted in their rock being buried. Because all the misfortunes have to do with the actual storm and flooding and mudslides, not actually covering up the rock. According to Iceland Monitor, the Elfin Lady Stone is classified as an artifact according to laws from 2012, which note that all places reputed for magic or are connected to folklore, folktales, customs, or national beliefs should be protected for their cultural heritage. Because of that, because it's classified as a protected artifact that represents cultural heritage, not because elves actually live in it, it was unearthed. If you could bring up the first slide, you can see it being unearthed, excavated. And then it was cleaned with a high-powered hose. If you can bring up the next slide. Yes.
Sound effect.
Not a particularly prepossessing looking stone, but There's no sign indicating that the stone was an artifact.
Ryan's his job. He's a rock washer. He washes rocks.
Yes.
He's doing a good job too.
There was no sign on it saying it was an artifact, so the company didn't realize it was, and apparently no one really noticed until June that it came to the attention of the town council that an artifact of cultural importance had been buried. They sent a letter to the Icelandic Road Commission, which was happy to comply with its request. And so everything ended happily. And basically that's all the Icelandic language report says. Nothing about angry elves, nothing about misfortunes. So the news story aimed at Icelanders, nothing to do with elves. Just an artifact was buried and has been unearthed. But that story would never have made it outside of Iceland's borders, to Boing Boing and Raw Story and a dozen other outlets if it hadn't been for the elves. The same's true of that protester of that road through the lava field. No one would have paid any attention to an environmental protest in some tiny country, but you add elves and suddenly the story's in the New York Times. As I said, the elf lobby was basically just one woman. And that is often the case. Stories about Iceland's elves often feature either the elf communicator woman or the guy who runs the elf school in Reykjavik. Surveys. There's an elf school.
What?
There's an elf school in Reykjavik.
Of course there is.
Yeah. It was
You're
featured
just going to
on.
leave it at that? That it's like this is an elf school.
Is it for teaching elves or for teaching about elves? Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
It's
featured on an episode.
I envisioned lots of little tiny desks,
Yeah.
filled with like Smurfs or something.
No, elves are
Elves do not like being
tall,
called
skinny,
Smurfs.
and
Nerd!
It was featured on an
They'd be
episode of
teaching
Travel
classes.
Man with Richard Iowade. He went to elf school. It was kind of amusing. Anyway, surveys do tend to indicate that a surprisingly large number of Icelanders believe in elves and ghosts and some other supernatural things. But these surveys may be misleading. What?
Trees.
Trees. Yeah. No, they've heard about trees, but some Icelanders definitely do believe.
That's
pretty. But lots of Americans believe in weird things too, like that Donald Trump would make a good president. But many Icelanders seem to choose not to disbelieve in elves rather than actually actively believing in them. Some, like Bjork, for instance, seem to see them as a symbol of the land. That's how they were being used in the environmentalist argument about the lava field. And also, some Icelanders seem to enjoy weaving tales for foreigners. So, when Reagan and Gorbachev met in Iceland, and you had lots of reporters wandering around with time on their hands, aside from buying warmer clothes because they weren't really prepared for Iceland in October. And like an Icelander told a reporter, "Oh, the building where they're meeting is haunted," which comes from apparently back in the 19th century, like a British ambassador stayed there and saw a white lady, which is a very English sort of ghost anyway, not Icelandic. And then after he left, they found tons of like white horse whiskey or something, and so the joke is that the white lady was on a white horse. But it was just some Icelander telling tales to the reporters, not necessarily anything they even believed. So that may contribute too. And while the elves presumably do bring tourists, some Icelanders are kind of irked at the way that they're portrayed as superstitious, credulous moonbats whenever an elf story hits the news, and many of the stories end up being highly inaccurate. So forget the elves. Iceland is spectacular, as the slide that is up now shows. That is a volcano erupting with the aurora borealis in the background.
It's an awesome picture.
Yep. There are glaciers and waterfalls and geysers, which is a nice
my.
word. And shut up. And bubbling mud pits and black sand beaches and odd, funky rock formations and the mid-Atlantic ridge, making Iceland perhaps the only country where, when they were deciding where to put their parliament, someone said, "Oh, I don't know. How about the edge of that tectonic plate thingy?" It's not there anymore. It's in Reykjavik now, which is miles away from the tectonic plate, or the edge of it. And Iceland is also one of the most aggressively literate countries on the planet. According to, admittedly, a not entirely reliable source, more medieval, but this is plausible, more medieval literature survives in Icelandic than any other European language except Latin. And, okay, props to Latin for being number one despite being a dead language, but wherever there was Christianity, there was Latin, and wherever there was literacy, there was Christianity. Icelandic was only pretty much written in this teeny tiny country, and it's always been a tiny country. But they just wrote and they wrote and they wrote and they wrote, and they still do. Their per capita output of book writing, it's still fairly
I
impressive.
spoke to an Icelander not long ago, and he told me that most of those books suck.
I'm sure they may very well do so. So do many American books.
Too many.
Sturgeon's Law, 92% of everything sucks.
Yeah, there you go. But anyway, so when you see stories about Icelandic elves, take them with a grain of salt, and remember, Icelanders aren't just novelty Europeans with an elf obsession.
Not.
Woohoo!
I'm putting this down.
Not
Europeans, even though their country is clearly a joke. Yes, okay.
Not novelty. They are Europeans.
We just lost our one Icelandic listener, Bob.
I know.
It's all your fault.
Yeah.
Well, no, the entire landscape is designed to kill.
Well, yeah, so is Australia's.
Yeah.
Well, in Australia, it's
on
more
opposite sides of the
Well,
earth.
Absolutely, it's
also-
the animals, not the absolute
it's
landscape.
the fauna that want to kill you, and
This is
in
the
Iceland,
very
it's the
landscape
geology.
itself. Yeah, the landscape, the volcanoes, the eruptions, the acid
Geology
rain.
and meteorology, the biology in Australia, the
The
geology.
banking system,
All that too.
open manhole covers.
Okay.
I don't know why I said that. Okay, what are we doing now?
I think we're done. Are we done?
Nathan said that he'd been at that building. He'd been in that building before.
Yep. And he
Yeah,
says,
the-
"How bored was that ghost?"
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Nathan. So I think we're wrapping up. We've done all the interesting bits, and you guys have hopefully had fun listening to our babble. At least my babble. Y'all are actually saying stuff. We've got to wrap up a few things. Did any? Well, I saw some people try to answer the trivia question. Did anybody actually get it? Or good enough, I guess?
Close.
Well, two people got super close. Howard and Pierre both correctly identified that Jean Damoget was from Belgium. So it would be the Belgian Skeptic organization, and if you remember, I've mentioned it a couple times in 2014 and 2015 on earlier trivia
remember
questions.
the exact episode. No.
I could dig it out if you want, but
Just kidding.
Comité Para, one of the older skeptical organizations, is essentially the Belgian version of PsyCop, and it was founded in 1949.
Wow.
Jean Damoget was president of it later than that, but yep.
No.
So that's who he
Okay.
was.
So, and who got it first?
I think Howard and Pierre got it right around the same time.
Yeah.
One was on
Congratulations,
Twitter,
guys.
and one was in the YouTube comments, and it's hard to know
Yep.
exact timing.
Yeah. 3 people got the video behind me. before I even asked people to. Which is, it's an easy one, but it's kind of a tribute because Gene Wilder passed this week. Nathan got it first, I think, and Eric Knoll got it second, and then Blake, Dr. Landis, got it as well, and added a nice little "aww" because of the tribute. So I'm glad you guys knew what was going on. Okay, then. Announcements? Do you have any announcements this week? Is there? I mean, there's stuff going on, but
Dragon Con is this weekend, but none of us will be there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of weird actually, but.
And a lot of the other regulars won't be there, but there's a ton of people who will be there.
Yep.
Derek and Swoopy are there, and let me go. Skip track. Let's see who's there. Come on, website. The Skeptics Guide guys are there. Brian Brushwood's going to be there. John
cool.
Loftus.
He's always fun.
Dan Barker, Margaret Downey, Ian Harris, some Mandisa Thomas, Ben Davis, David Tamayo, Brian Dunning.
No, wow.
Who hasn't been at Dragon Con in quite a while.
I know.
And so, they will be doing skeptic stuff at Dragon Con if you want to go down there.
Yep.
I will possibly see you next year, but I will not be there this year.
Yep. So if you're in the Atlanta area, if you're going to Dragon Con, you've probably already planned it for the last year. So
you better have.
You got to plan ahead.
Yeah. But if you're there and you weren't already planning to go buy the Skep track, when you have time, go over there, see some cool stuff, meet some of the cool people. It's worth it. And I wish that I haven't been in years, and I wish I could get back sometime soon. Maybe next year. Who knows? All right then.
It was awesome.
What?
We went to 3 of them.
Yeah, I think Dragon Cons. I've been to 2 Dragon Cons, and they were both really, really cool. I don't know if I could do it every year. It is a bit overwhelming. But
that's one of the reasons we're taking it off this year, just to kind of give it a rest and come back rejuvenated next year.
Yep. I actually did a guest host spot on another podcast on Monday, a show called Mythwits, done by Peter Bryant and Mike Caff, who it's geeky, science-y, and I do a lot of board game stuff. They're friends. They're here in Maryland, and they needed someone to sit in on an interview for an astronomer, Ethan, and what the heck is his last name? Oh my God. I will correct it in the show notes because it was a really cool show. They talked about dark matter, and it really just, every time that topic comes up, it really blows my mind. Did some fun games. So I will link in the show notes. It's a cool show. Go check it out if you want more of my stupid ramblings. Mythwits. Mythwits. Book time, I think, is the only thing we have left. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody got books? Who wants to go?
Amazingly enough.
Tim? Want to go first?
Sure. I'll go first. The American Heart Association says the major kinds of fats in the foods we eat are saturated, polyunsaturated, monounsaturated, and trans fatty acids.
Mm-hmm.
Saturated fats, trans fats, and dietary cholesterol raise blood cholesterol. A high level of cholesterol in the blood is a major risk factor for coronary heart disease, which leads to heart attack. Saturated fats come from animals. In Leviticus 7:22-24, we are told, quote, "And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, You shall eat no manner of fat, of ox, or of sheep, or of goat."
I was wondering when that was going to go sideways. Who's next? Bob?
Finally, on February 12, 1902, the committee announced its findings. They reported that the diphtheria antitoxin was issued by the city was prepared, bottled, and distributed by and under the supervision of Dr. Revold, who was responsible for its quality. That a horse kept by the city for serum production did contract tetanus and was killed. That Dr. Revold knew the serum from this horse was contaminated but failed to destroy it. That, owing to this inexcusable negligence, the contaminated serum was in part bottled and issued to physicians with the ensuing tragic results. That the bottling of the serum was done by Taylor, the janitor, who, also probably unaware that the serum was contaminated, had obscured and retarded the investigation by giving conflicting statements under oath, first saying that all the serum had been destroyed, then admitting that only a small quantity had been thrown out. In view of these findings, the board recommended that Dr. Revold and Taylor be dismissed from the service of the health department, that the city stop manufacturing diphtheria antitoxin. The health commissioner complied.
Eve?
But Alfred, who just coincidentally, whose name means elf council, did not content himself with giving money or land to schools and other places of learning, or with hospitably entertaining scholars from other lands. He set the example of a diligent love of letters. He found time amidst all the distractions of war and government to be a student and a writer. When he was nearly 40, he had at last the opportunity of learning Latin. At his accession, indeed, as he tells us himself, very few south of the Humber and not one south of the Thames could translate from Latin into English. This was the deplorable state of things which he had to remedy, and he remedied it by his own personal exertions.
Okay. I don't understand, Angus says for the third time. First, it was disbelief that Ken had been followed and possibly threatened by the Philip Morris goons. We don't know they were Philip Morris, Ken warned. Just seems the most likely candidate. Then it was reluctance to admit that Ken had gotten some valuable intel with his unorthodox methods. Now, Angus is hung up on technical details. How did they take the poll without it coming up in information? Suzuki, conferencing from Budapest, doesn't bother to hide his irritation. They used pen and paper, kid. The flash of pique from his boss lets Ken take the high road. It's amazing, he says. I can't imagine how many people they used or how long it took, but they wanted to have this intel without anyone else knowing. Stop there. Tim, what's your book?
It's Scientific Facts from the Bible by Ray Comfort.
Oh, wow, that's going to be great.
Oh, my God.
There's some good stuff in here. This was a birthday gift from Dr. Atlantis. Thanks, Dr. Atlantis.
Who clearly hates you.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like,
Did
what
he actually
you do to
spend
Dr.
money
Atlantis?
on it? Yeah. I hope he didn't spend money on it.
I don't know where he got it, but I got it now.
I'm sure it goes further south than what we read.
Oh, yeah.
Bob.
This was the early years of federal food and drug control. It's a pamphlet. Well, not a pamphlet, but it's the proceedings of a 1982 symposium at the American Institute of the History of Pharmacy, presided over by James Harvey Young, who's the historian of American quackery.
I bet that's really interesting and scary.
Yeah, you bet it is.
From that clip you read, yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Eve. Oh, sorry, moving on.
When I was in Chicago, I saw a report of a girl who got rabies from that antitoxin, that diphtheria antitoxin.
Wow.
Yeah, so.
Wow. Eve.
Early Britain by Alfred J. Church.
Nice label. How old is that book?
It's 19th century.
Interesting.
And I should point out that in case anyone hasn't, Putting Ritz is coming up behind you.
What?
What?
In the video behind you, it's the putting on the Ritz scene.
Oh, it is.
Oh,
Yay! Written on the Ritz. Okay, so mine is a book called Infomocracy. It's fiction by Malka Older, which it's got a really cool shiny cover. I'm gonna have to describe.
That's what attracted you to it originally.
Yeah, it's really. It's like, ooh, that's cool. No, a fast-paced post-cyberpunk political thriller with sword fights and gerrymandering. It's essentially a technological world where politics and industry and market forces and all that stuff kind of merge together because of large data sets and technology allowing data mining and all kinds of stuff. And that particular scene I read was to get ahead. They had this crazy idea of collecting intelligence without technology by hand on paper because they could hide it that way, which is interesting.
Wasn't that Donald Trump's plan for issuing orders to the military? Because the computers could be hacked.
Yeah.
So written messages.
But did you watch like an episode of Battlestar Galactica?
Fucking kidding me? Sorry.
It'll be huge.
I'm gonna use Speckled Jim.
Speckled Jim.
Speckled Jim. Okay then, that was a great show. Thanks for watching, and I'll let you guys watch that while I do this. No, I gotta do that. Let me do that. Watch the dancing. Virtual Skeptics is an independent production of whatstheharm.net, Skeptical Humanities, myself, ICBS Everywhere, and Doubtful News. Our logo was designed by Sarah Mayhew at sarahmayhew.com, and our theme music is by Musicant and used with permission. That is awesome. See you, everybody.